Alrighty, traders, welcome back. What is going on? Kyle Williams here. And if you've noticed, I did not make a video recap last month. I mentioned on Twitter that I was going to go on vacation. I pretty much did that. I mean, right when the month ended, went to Florida to see some family, and then went to Turks and Caicos. Absolutely beautiful. I recommend going there if you haven't. It's awesome. But anyway, so I was busy. I told you guys I would kind of combine both months into this. And so that's what we're going to do. We're going to go over August a little bit more than July, just because August, I think, is a little bit more eventful. But either way, both months got tied together by essentially, I mean, not even essentially, literally my biggest loss of my career. And so I would call it like the the tale of 2 months, maybe, like the tale of two cities, if you've seen that or read that. Anyways, let's just jump right in. A lot to cover. Don't want this video to go too long, but let's jump into some of the things I remember from July. I mean, it seems like forever ago, even though it was only 60 days back. But the biggest gain from July was on the 13th, which was ILAG. ILAG was an IPO kind of China bump. These have gotten pretty popular. I've talked about them in previous videos that I've made. And so if you haven't, I'm not going to go into too much detail, but if you want to go back and learn about those, go back and watch my previous videos. Also, like I mentioned in all other videos, Laptop Legend, he has a great YouTube channel on them. So yeah, go check those out. Anyways, this was one of those. If we go to, what is this, the 13th, if we just do a little custom date here. So it was an IPO, and the IPO price was down to like $5, $6 around there. And like most of these IPO scams that come into the market, they open up much higher than expected. And again, these were kind of when they've been going on for a very long time, and I've only been really trading them seriously this year. But they've gained a lot of popularity this year because they've been such a reliable, pattern that's been happening. And right out the open, right when it opened up at $22, I immediately saw the tape and just had a feel for it. They were selling, right? The insiders who own the shares, the underwriters who have the shares to sell, they were selling it, right? All this volume's coming in and it's going nowhere. It can't break 22. So I immediately start getting short. I actually have my trades here. Yeah, we'll make this bigger for you. Obviously, you see how many trades we can go over here in the video. There's a ton. So you can see right out the open, I just start getting short. Again, it was super heavy. It wasn't getting over 22. They were clearly selling. It starts to fade a little bit. I get short some more. But ultimately, they didn't really dump it yet, right? They kind of hold it, and they bring it back. And then they squeeze it. And part of me did anticipate this. And so my trade plan was like, I have a stop in the high 20s. 30 worst case. Like if you see 30, just get the hell out, look to re-enter or reevaluate if it happens to actually dump later on. And so when we go to 26, like I've got my finger on the trigger. I'm like, that just ready to stop out because this is not how they usually should go. Now, granted, the reason why I had that wide stop is because I do know from previous pumps or previous scams, they will try to do some kind of move to fake people out, right? This isn't out of the ordinary. Especially because they've gotten popular. They're finding, I don't know if they're actually doing it, but there's many ways now that people stop themselves out or they don't dump these yet because there's just too many shorts in them, whatever the case may be. But it squeezed. Luckily, I didn't have to cut it. I was, again, like I said, my finger was on the trigger, pulled back, and then once it dipped here and still wasn't dumping, then I reevaluated. I said, okay, it might not dump. Let me downsize, and so that's what you see these green candles for. But then immediately it stayed heavy, it stayed sideways, and I'm like, you know what? If I start seeing any more selling, I'm going to get short. And so I just got lucky enough to get short right before this dump, and the rest is history, right? Stayed patient, covered into the close, into the 7 and 6 area, and ultimately came out with a $104,000 win. So huge, awesome, sweet six-figure win. That was great. Most of these IPO pumps, I haven't been that great on them, besides ILAG and LYT, which I went over, I believe, in my last video. Those were some of my biggest and best, these IPO scams trade. So any other trades that I was more kind of memorable about July was TBLT. Now TBLT was just a standard supernova runner, ran from 250 all the way up to 10 in about 4 days. And one thing that makes this unique and why I wanted to go over it, is because this is a great daily chart. We haven't seen a daily chart like this in a long time, back in July. And I did some digging in their filings, and they needed cash terribly bad, like awfully bad, like so bad that I was confident enough to say that if I could swing this, I'm going to catch an offering. I don't usually say that because I don't actually catch very many offerings very often. I've only caught maybe 4 or 5 in my entire trading career. But this one, I had that feeling. I was like, they need cash terribly bad, worse than I've ever seen before. And it just wouldn't shock me if I swung this and caught an offering. So that's exactly what I did. Let's go my trades. It's a better look here. Let's get rid of ILAG. So I started in small, right? Took a small starter here because granted, at the end of the day, you have to remember, we're still front side, right? Just because I think there's an offering or an offering that's going to happen doesn't mean this thing can't go higher. I mean, this thing could have had one more day if they wanted to try to delay an offering and send it to 10 plus, maybe even go to 12, right? So I still had to have a trade plan. I still had to have risk management. It's not just an end all be all, oh, they're going to have an offering. I don't care about risk management anymore, right? That was not the goal or ever the goal. And so I started in small, almost cut it when it almost broke here, kind of a double top really. And then I started adding on kind of pops, you should say. Not too big of pops, but just enough where I thought it was kind of holding resistance levels. And the level I was kind of watching in the sand here was this like mid to high 850s, 860s, 870s. This kind of level, I thought if it can reclaim this level by the close, that's a little bit too strong for me. That looks almost like I'm not too much of like a triangle or a wedge trader, but at the same time, it would kind of be forming this wedge like up to the highs and could easily go higher. So I was really looking at this line as a form of resistance. I know this for me to swing, I was like, I need this to stay below this to look weak and to kind of look like the beginning of a backside. And so that's what I did. I just kind of started in and added more as we kept failing and holding those levels. My last add into the close here, and I swung. And pretty much I was going to risk the highs. Was very comfortable with the fact that it didn't ever even touch the 860, 870 level, and I swung overnight. And as you can see, obviously it gives it away on the daily chart. We fell pretty hard from 8 to 6, and that's this intraday chart here. They ended up having an offering. Like I ended up nailing it perfectly. They gapped down. It sold off pre-market. Unfortunately, I was actually very close to adding here. Just being a spike towards red-green as a typical overextended gap down play. Like ignore the fact if I was even swinging overnight short. Either way, this is still a great overextended gap down kind of play. But they came out with the offering news very quickly, and it just dumped super hard. Covered a little bit here, covered a little bit into these dips, and then once it bounced, I had a feeling it was going to just chop around the rest of the day, which it did, and so I got out. Ultimately locked in about 24, 25 grand on that trade. Really stoked about that. Again, like I said, I don't ever really nail offerings too well or at all. But this one, I just did a little extra digging in the filings and was a little bit convicted, and it worked out great. So really happy about that one. And then comes the mother of all losses that I took. Right, this was the 25th on TBLT, and then you can see at the end of the week on the 29th, easily my worst day ever. And then to follow the 1st of August. On top of that, another 6-figure loss. So 2 6-figure losses back-to-back days on the same ticker, which was HKD. And now I've tweeted about this on Twitter. You've all probably seen plenty of other traders talk about their losses or just the ticker in general, because it's arguably the biggest black swan kind of mover we've seen in a very long time. Pretty much went from the low of $12 to high as 2,500 in a matter of 2 weeks. And there's multiple mistakes I made, but the biggest mistake I made was just thinking that this wasn't the black swan, right? And I learned very quickly. So let's just go into what exactly happened. So if we actually go, I don't even know if we can get it, but you can't even see it because the chart's just so messed up. But this candle right here, the 22nd, let me just look at here. Let's actually do this. August 22nd, or no, July 22nd. So it squeezed, right? So this volume is pretty decent. Squeezed into the close. I actually took a very small short overnight, roughly around like the low 60s here, and it pulled back the next day. Let's actually go to the 25th, the next Monday. Gap down huge and sold off all the way down to 40. I made, like, in such a small position, I made like 4 or 5 grand. Cool, right? It worked. I saw a squeeze. I saw shorts getting blown out. Next day, there were no shorts left to get squeezed or squozen. If that's even a word. Gap down, and I made money. Unfortunately, that conditioned me to think that that's how this ticker was just going to work, right? That was mistake number 1, because once we started squeezing again let's look at, like, where's this one? So yeah, as you can see, many trades here. This one. As you can see on this day, right, on the 28th, when it started squeezing, well over from 80 to 160 in a day, I just thought to myself, this is super similar to what it was just last week or just earlier that week. Shorts are getting squeezed. I think I could get short overnight with a small position and have it gap down the next day. Again, you see me try to get short into these pops, thinking this is the top, cover. I take one more shot short here. Again, very similar to the previous one where the squeeze was like into the close and hold overnight. Now, the next morning on this one, let me get this out of here. You can clearly see here that's not what happened, right? It spiked up to high as 250, gap down on a huge halt down. And then once this happened, I thought this was dead, right? This is a huge, this went from 250 to 150, a full 100-point move, and just died. So at that point, I'm confident, like, oh, we died, good. It'll fade. I don't even have to look at it anymore. We're done. Biggest mistake I could have made, right? Because you can clearly see it came back, and right here, this 250 cut should have been it, right? This is one of the biggest traps you could see for it to pull back a whole $100 a share and still come back. Like once it breaks this high, I should have been out, no questions asked. And I unfortunately the day was such a haze for me because it was just such a monumental, emotional, and just crazy day that I don't remember if I got stubborn. I don't remember if I just froze. I honestly think it was a little bit of both, and I just let it go against me, right? And of course, you see finally late day, rally hits me. I'm like, if this can go from, if this can pull back $100 a share and still recover, and we're having moves and volatility and low volume, like again, this volume is nothing like it was on the first time I shorted, where it had 40 million or 40,000 shares a candle. This has like barely 10 at the highest, more like 4,000 or 5,000 shares a candle, which is just way different liquidity. So we're having these huge swings, we're having these huge spreads, and I'm just thinking to myself, this is not okay. This is not good. And you've heard me talk about, if you watch my previous videos, you've heard me talk about, I have two scenarios when I do this, right? I either put on a very small position and I'll risk some of these scams or pumps. I'll do 100% like risk, right? So my risk reward is like 1-to-1, right? I'll risk 100% to make 90%, call it just 1-to-1 to be symmetrical here. But I'll only put on about at max 10% of my account size, just in case in those times that I do get stubborn, that I allow myself to ride through a little bit of a squeeze, and then once it dies, I can just get out. That squeeze was this, right? Not this, right? And that's kind of why I say this should have been the cut, because I was now going against my plan completely. And I got what I deserved, right? I ended up covering to the top of this day, I should say. You guys will learn as I go on here. But yeah, this was the first 120K loss that I took, 130K loss. Pretty much when it went way too much against me, went well over 100%. Again, I got stubborn. But the worst part was, like I said, the reason why I mentioned 100% stop loss or only 10% of my account is, I don't know what I was thinking. I literally, once it was up here, once it was in this range, and I realized what I got myself into, I did the math, and I was way over like 10% of my account. I was like between 20 and 30, right? And so the fact that I was between 20-30% of my account and position size, and I'm up over 100% down on my position, that's when reality hit me. And that's why you see me finally covering when it's unfortunately the worst time to cover of the day, near the highs. But it is what it is. It hit me. Thank God it hit me here, because it went much higher. And yeah, so that was the first 125K loss that I took. Unfortunately, the next biggest mistake was that I took the same exact idea in a different account. So that first one was in Cobra, or it was in Guardian. This one was in Cobra. And again, same thing, same idea. Took a small short, a couple hundred shares. And luckily, this one was much smaller percentage-wise in my account. This was like closer to 10%. Again, did I think about it in the moment? No. Just like in the previous count, I thought it was at 10%. It wasn't. My math was way off. Luckily, with Cobra, it was. So it was a little bit safer there, but doesn't take away the fact that it was still roughly the same position size as my Guardian account, right? Both accounts were just or my Guardian was just smaller than my Cobra. Let's put it that way. Now back to that Guardian trade, or that Guardian look where I covered near the highs in the 400s. I didn't cover my Cobra, right? I gave it one last chance. I swung it over the weekend. I said, okay, here's my plan. I'm either going to cut it over those highs or it's going to die, right? And because again, in my thinking, of course, it's easy to say in hindsight, but in present moment, I'm thinking this thing just ran from, $50-$60 to 500. If that's going to be the top, that's going to be it. And if it's not going to be the top, then I need to get the hell out. And so when it pulled all the way down to 300, I mean, literally, this is sub 300 here, right at the lows here. And then it came back to red green, and again, on even lower volume, right? It's almost every day got lower, right? Every day went from 40 to 30K a candle to 10, and now we're barely pushing 5,000 shares a candle. That is like not how supernovas should happen, right? That is not how some of the pump and upside trades should happen, right? The volume should be getting bigger, not smaller. And so when we, did another, and again, I learned my lesson from the sense that when we pulled from 250 to 150 and then came back, same thing here. When we pulled from 400 to sub 300 and then come back, to me, risking 500 or risking the previous day's highs in the 480s, 490s, whatever it was, I said, screw that. Like, this ticker is from another planet. I'm getting the hell out. And so I did. I covered there and took another, 125 K loss, 120 loss, whatever it was. So ultimately down $250,000 on this ticker. That's why you see, both these days here and here. I took another loss on VRAX on the 29th, which is why you see negative 150. But then again, almost 130 on the 1st of August. Ultimately putting me down between $250,000 to 280,000, if you want to be exact. And but again, thank God I cut it, because we went, as you can see here, we ended up squeezing late day to 900, and then the day after that going to literally 2,500. And even then, it took a whole week or so to get back down to 113. So even from my original short in the 170s, 80s, 90s, wherever it was, I'd barely be up even now. It hasn't even come close to coming back down to the 20s and 10s and 30s where it probably should be, and eventually probably will be. Again, my mistakes was just freezing. Clearly too big of a position size. Wasn't respecting my wide stop. Ignoring the traps. Again, that 250 to 150 and then recover trap reminds me of Dries, because Dries did something very similar where he had this huge pull, and by late day it was coming back. Just over position size. My math was way off on it. Again, at the end of the day, at least I cut, right? I know I've heard many horror stories of traders who just didn't and just held and practically lost everything. And it's scary to think about that if I wasn't disciplined, my loss could have been much worse, right? Would I have lost everything? No, but my losses could have easily approached 500 to close to $1 million, which is the scariest thing to think about. And thankfully it didn't, right? I'm so glad it didn't. And so, and on this day, once I finally, reality set in, I remember the market closing. I remember just staring at this wall in front of me, and I remember just doing nothing practically all day for the rest of the day. I was so exhausted and drained. Not so much from the loss, like the monetary value of the loss, yes, absolutely sucks. But it was the undisciplinedness, it was the embarrassment of myself. It wasn't like anyone knew until I come out and be transparent about it, which I was going to do anyway, right? I've always been that kind of a trader. But I was embarrassed with myself before even anyone knew. I was just like, I can't believe I let myself get here. Again, so many things, like I said, just went off and I ignored. And when I finally reflected on all of it, I said, okay, I'm a human being. This happens. Nobody's perfect. I made a mistake. How can I get better from this? And it took me a while. It took me about a few full days of I've never been someone who's been considered depressed, right, or depressed, because clinical depression is a very serious thing. And so I wasn't even close to there, but I had my glimpse of it, right? You have your little glimpse of just being so down on yourself. And finally I got out of it and I said, okay, it happened. It's in the past. There's literally nothing I can do anymore. I cannot control it anymore. It is in the past. What I can control is how am I going to recover, right? How am I going to respond to this event? in my trading career. And I said, you know what? I made one mistake. It's not a reflection of all of the other setups and strategies that I've taken. Arguably, this wasn't even a setup and strategy I've taken because they broke my rules. Like I said, even when I swing pumps and I give 100% stop loss on it, and I only have 10% of my account on it, that wasn't this. My math was way off. I got stubborn. I didn't do that. Ultimately, you can argue it wasn't even part of my strategy. And in many ways, it wasn't with the volume. It certainly wasn't a IPO scam by any means. There hasn't been a dump, right? Like that we've seen with like ILAG or all these other previous ones that we've seen. It certainly isn't an OTC pump that I love to swing. So yeah, in so many ways, it was outside my system. And so once I realized that, I said, okay, let's go back. Let's size down. Let's go back to what literally got me here in the first place. And I'll recover just fine. And so the funny part is, after I took this loss, I was fully accepting the fact that August would be red. I'm like, you know what? This is awful. August in previous months has been not great months for me. I mean, in 2021, which is an insanely hot market, I pulled out 34,000, which is great. But again, compared to what the other months were, not nearly as big. Same thing with 2020. Actually, 2020 actually was pretty good. But I remember August 2019, I mean, barely pulling out $1,000. August 2018, pull out $4,000, which is decent. But I just remember and then you've heard me talk about this before if you watch my videos for a long time. Usually the fall months, August, September, October, generally are the more tougher months for trading. And so I was fully prepared for that for this August. Luckily, that ended up not being the case, and I actually came out green, which is funny because I ended up being green both months. Essentially, so one month essentially giving back my entire month, right, in July, and then August making back the huge loss. And if you look at like my profitly chart here, you can see it. This huge dip right here is HKD. If we go like this, actually, let's see if I can get the reset out of here. There you go. Pretty much pulled $300,000, right, from 3.7 to about 3.4, just under $300,000, like I said. And now we're back to 3.6 after this month. So pretty much recovering just fine. Like I said, I responded in a much healthier manner after I got over it. And thankfully, August had given me a lot of great opportunities. I mean, I had plenty of 5-figure days. And that's one thing I've learned about my trading is that if I can have anywhere from a small handful to even a large handful of 5-figure days, it usually leads to an easy 6-figure month. And again, if you want to delete this, so just hypothetically, say without HKD, I had a great 140,000 month. That's awesome. I'm stoked when I make over 100,000 in a month, especially in this market in 2022, which is insanely tougher than previous years for a lot of traders. Some traders are killing it, right? Every market is different for every trader, but in comparison to 2020 and 2021, 2022 has been a much tougher market. I was actually been talking about this with a few traders not to get too sidetracked here, but many traders I know that made 6-7 figures in 2020, 2021. Those markets made them, right? And I'm part of them. I can certainly say, like, before COVID, when that really kicked off the market, I was just under $250,000 in profits, right? So I had a good start, but really the vast majority of my profits came in those years. So I would absolutely consider myself, I was one of those traders that quote unquote, made it in those years. Like the markets in those years made me as a trader, along with all the other ones I'm referring to. Unfortunately, 2021 or 2022, again, with the overall economy, the recession, the Fed, all these things going on, has changed the market dynamic dramatically. And a lot of traders who crushed it those years are struggling in this year. And by no means would I say I'm struggling. I'm still having a great year. But this will be the first year, unless September, October, November, and December just become blowout months. This will be the first year I've actually made less than the previous year, which is fine, right? That's going to happen. I would never expect my 10, 20, 30-year career that I would love to have in trading every year be more. That's a little bit ridiculous, right? But this will be the first year. This will be the first dose of, if you want to call it reality, that this market has broken a lot of traders, if not made it much more harder for traders like myself and for anyone who is, like I said, who crushed it in 2020 and 2021. So anyway, off that tangent, but dealing with something like HKD is one of those examples, right? It's a huge bump that I've had to overcome. I'm not technically overcome it completely because we are still down from the highs, But like I said, I couldn't be happier with how I really handled it, because just to come back green by the end of August is great. So let's go into some August trades. The most, iconic ticker of August would be BBBY. BBBY, again, former meme stock from AMC and GME back in 2021. This time, BBBY had its own show of its own, right? Had its own supernova, it was the leader. Went going from $5 to as high as 30, and in a crazy, insane series of events, back down to $8. And so, yes, I made money on this overall move, but in comparison to former meme stock supernovas, not so great. And so we'll go over that. Let me just go over some trades here. So let's get rid of these charts. So essentially what BBBY was for me was a roller coaster of being up a couple grand, going down 10, 15, 20 grand. Recovering back to up a couple grand, going back down negative 10, 15, 20 grand. This happened maybe 3 or 4 times in a row, which is exhausting, right? If I could just have minimize those losses in half, it could have been going up 10 grand, going back down 10 grand, going up 20, going back down 10. Like, I could have at least slowly accumulated more gains every time I traded it, but it was the opposite. It was like I was just fighting to get practically break even every single time, which is why it was so exhausting. And so you see all these trades I've taken here. The reality was, after everything, all these candles, this candle, this group, this group, this group, this group, and even here, break even. Like, I don't even remember where the losses are. I could clearly tell I stopped out here, definitely stopped out a little bit here. Clearly made some money on this pull and on this pull. But all I know is by the end of the day, I was break even on this trade. Out of all these entries and exits. However, I remember thinking that we had this huge blow off parabolic, this huge crack into late day. Again, I'm thinking this is backside, and so I actually take a very small starter position into this bounce. Like, I didn't want to short it because I thought like it was going to fade and I didn't want to chase it. But when we're bouncing, I'm like, we're backside. This is a huge resistance now in the high 20s. I trust it with a starter. I'm going to take a starter. And in some ways, that wasn't a terrible idea. Unfortunately, it would have been better if I just hadn't, because the next day it actually does gap up right back to its highs. And so at this point I'm thinking like, wow, this could easily just blow off. And again, this is just after HKD, after the trap of all traps. I'm like, this could go 40, 50. I'm like, I need to get out. And so I do that. You see me covering. Again, starting back in a negative. Like I said, I was break even. So this is what I mean, guys. I was break even after all this, decide to take a small starter short, and before you know it, I cover and I'm back down. I think it was like 10 grand on a starter, because it just went so far against me. And again, I was willing to risk that. I was willing for it to go against new highs to me because I trusted this resistance so well. But did I actually think it was going to happen? No. Unfortunately, the low odds chance it did, it happened. And as you can see here, again, it's kind of similar as the day before. Just chopping myself up, making some, losing some. Again, just all over the place. And very similar to this day, again, I shorted this little bounce here, made a lot of money back. Same thing here is a little bit different. This time, for those of you who don't know why BBBY was up or what the move was, Ryan Cohen, who is a chairman member or on the board of GameStop, bought, I believe, call options, and I believe some shares. I think it might have just been options. Don't quote me on exactly, but essentially he bought the stock, and Wall Street Bets took it by storm and said, "Oh my gosh, if he's buying, I'm buying," and the stock skyrocketed. Right now, in after hours, or in really late day, Ryan Cohen filed I forget what filing it is. I'm not even going to say it to butcher it or misinformation, but he filed the filing saying like, hey, when he owns as many shares of a stock, he has to file that he has the intention to sell. He did that. And when that happened, pretty much the thesis behind Wall Street Bets and why the stock is up is just ruined. And so it got crushed. I shorted with the intention of swinging overnight, because I ended up actually swinging overnight, because the whole thesis is shot that Ryan Cohen is either selling his shares or is going to sell. Now, granted, As stubborn and as persistent as Wall Street Bets is, it was all over Twitter and social media that, like, okay, so what? Ryan has filed a filing to say he's going to sell, but he hasn't sold yet, right? But that didn't mean anything to me. To me, it was like, this stock is dead. He is going to sell. He wouldn't file that if he wasn't going to sell. So I'm swinging. And so that's what I did. Swung overnight. Again, next day, I'm shorting these pops. I'm covering these dips. And I'm practically flat. I actually am flat after all this. And in my mind, the thesis is shot, right? Whether Ryan Cohen is sold or not sold, he filed with intention to sell. It's over. It's dead. That ended up being a massive underestimation for me. And so this is where it kind of hurt me and helped me. It helped me in the sense that I was aggressive enough to swing overnight and be dead on right, that this thing's going to kind of die. It was worse for me in the sense that because I was so convicted in that, I totally underestimated the idea that once he actually sold and proved to Wall Street Bets that he sold, how badly it would have tanked. Because again, so many people were still holding with the idea, like I just said, that, okay, he filed that he was going to sell, but he hasn't sold yet, right? I'm going to hold until he sells. Well, ironically, once after hours came, it came out that, yeah, no, he sold the day prior. He sold in the 20s. Like when this filing came out, or where is it? Forgive me here. When this came out, he actually was all sold, all up in here. Like, so the delay behind it was so ridiculous that finally Wall Street Bets realizes what's happened, and they bail. And the part that really was sucky about, or was really crappy about this, is that I saw this at 17, right? I saw the news. I saw that he actually sold. And in my mind, I'm thinking, yeah, duh. Like, again, I thought, yeah, of course he sold. Like, duh. Like, what do you mean he's selling? Why is this a surprise? Again, it wasn't a surprise to me. It was a huge surprise to everyone who was being stubborn and thought that he wouldn't have or hasn't yet. And so I see this and I'm kind of like, I'm not going to chase. I don't really know what this means. Big mistake, right? It goes to 16, 15. Finally, it hits me of like, okay, I made a mistake. Wall Street Bets is like dumping here. I short a little bit in 14, cover in the 13 because I just feel like I'm chasing. Goes down to 12. And I believe by the end of the after hours, that's not pictured in this picture, it's down to like $10. So massive miss. Could have been just a gigantic win if I just, wasn't so caught up in my forward looking of like, of course he sold, like I mentioned. If I had a little bit of realization of being in the shoes of like of a Wall Street's better, I should have been getting short as much as I possibly could at 17, right? And I actually saw a short. Funny, for those who were watching the tape and remember this, I actually saw a short get in. I mean, he had like 150K shares and it was on SSR, so he couldn't slap the bid. He was sitting on the ask and it was like literally 100K plus shares. I think it was 150 to be exact. And he was pushing it down himself, like from 17 to 16. I think he finally got filled all in the 16s, but like he was right. I mean, I don't know where he covered because it's just some random short. But I mean, if he had 150K shares from say 16, I mean, my lord, he's up. I mean, over $500,000 by 12 or $10, like crazy. So, congrats to that guy if he covered down there. Congrats, that's a huge win. But yeah, just completely underestimated it. And as you can look at the daily chart, that's what gapped it down here. And among all this period here, I mean, I just didn't trade it. Maybe took some trades, took some scalps. Ended up probably losing a couple of grand here and there because I was all not brainwashed, but just my mind was all mush on this ticker. I mean, I clearly read it completely wrong, at least on the further end of it, and on the top days, just getting chopped up. So again, ultimately, I ended up making like 12K or 14K on this kind of move in the swing overnight. But the reason why I'm kind of disappointed is, well, one, like I said, the massive upswings and downswings multiple times over when it just was so unnecessary. But also, too, if you want to make this comparison, I looked this up. If we go back to AMC, right, when AMC ran from, 10 or 20 to 80, right? If we go back, right, this move to $72. This whole move, I made 300 grand. Awesome. Like, so cool. And I made most of that in like 1 week, right? Most of that was made in pretty much this like period, this small week period here. So couldn't have been more stoked about how I handled a supernova and a meme stock supernova at that. And at the time, back last year, crushed it. I think AMC is probably my most profitable ticker, even to this day. Most money made on one ticker, I should say. Then you make the comparison to BBBY. Again, a whole year later of experience. Again, going through a tougher market, more trades, more experience, better understanding of price action. Just all the every hour you put in of practice adds on to your overall experience and skill as a trader, right? And so I have a whole year under my belt, and an eventful year nonetheless. Like I said, being 2022 as tough as it's been, you think I would do better. You think I would do, I don't want to put any monetary number on it, but again, just the vast difference between last year and this year, great. I'd much rather be green than red. Of course, I'll take that any day of the week. But again, you can see the performance issue here, right? Ignore the money, the monetary number, but look at like the performance wise, because performance will ultimately lead to that monetary value. And I can't help but look at this and think I screwed up or I missed this opportunity, which again is not the end of the world. There's always another opportunity around the corner if you're willing to be patient and wait. So it's not a big deal. There'll be plenty of more opportunities and plenty of great supernovas down the road. But reflecting on the current ones is, I think, how you get better. And so me being here and realizing that I made literally less than 1/10 of what I made a year prior on essentially the same kind of a move, the same kind of a meme stock supernova, is disappointing, right? Is the end of the world? Like I said, no, not at all. But it's how I want to improve. It's how I want to reflect on things and do better. And not only that, but I mean, even this bounce play on BBBY, I screwed that up as well. Literally, like if we go here, the stock finally bounced with anticipation of them being, or I think that like a company update. Unfortunately, I had so much PTSD from when BBBY chopped around in the high 20s, touching 30, pulling back to 24, squeezing back to 28, that I thought this day was going to be a kind of choppy. I was dead wrong. I mean, I remember like scalping it for a little bit of money, but then watching it die $3 a share lower, and being like, I can't believe I misread it so poorly. And then I still knew that the company update was going to come, and I was 99% positive that the company update wasn't going to be good. Like, this company's on the verge of bankruptcy, right? And so that's what happened. They came out saying, we're closing 100 and something stores, and it's going to be rough. And what do you know? It crashes even more. And unfortunately, I woke up too late. I woke up at like 7 a.m. Eastern time. Turns out I needed to wake up a little bit earlier, a whole hour earlier to catch this move. And so, unfortunately, I missed that. And so, yeah, this the whole theme is that I've pretty much missed most of the move on BBBY that could have really made me a significant amount of money. Is it the end of the world? No, but is it good to reflect on and remember this for next supernova, that like just overall learning for the next time? Yes, I agree, because I, again, compared to AMC, compared to now, vastly underperformed to what I'm capable of. And so besides that, I know I just talked about BBB for a very long time here, but in terms of that, the rest of August, there wasn't any big plays. It actually was quite refreshing in the fact that August just gave me a ton of awesome singles. And I don't want to say singles as lightly, because I mean, my single now is roughly around 6, 7, 8 grand, 9 grand. Some are plenty, or 10 grand. But like I said, if I have multiple days throughout the month where I can make 5 figures, I usually end up with a very good month. And that's kind of what happened. Like, one example was BWV. BWV, again, another IPO scam from a long time ago, back early in April. This is the huge day it dumped, 90% or whatever it was. But in August 17th, was their IPO lockup, right? This was exactly 6 months from their IPO date. And if you see me talk about IPO lockups, I did this with Rivian back in, I believe, 2 or 3 months ago. I shorted Rivian overnight. However, I unfortunately made the mistake of just not thinking about it, or thinking that they would try to squeeze BBW or BWV higher. So I didn't short overnight. When reality is, in hindsight, I should have. But if we go to my trades, let's actually just get rid of all these. BVW, I actually ended up taking a starter in the kind of low 5s, ended up adding in the high 5s, had probably eventually a 560, 570 average, and they just collapsed, right? Because they were here to solely sell shares. And normally I wouldn't be chasing a stock so that had such a big gap down from, mid sevens down to mid fives. Like that's quite a large gap down. But again, because I knew the lockup shares were available, I knew that this stock was going to probably sell off pretty hard. And there's a history of it dumping hard. Like even the previous bounces, this stock has no problem gapping down big and even selling off even more. So essentially that's what happened. Ended up covering late day. Unfortunately, didn't cover any down here and was trying to stay patient for lower. And unfortunately, waiting till late day to the last like hour would have gotten me the same price. And I ended up covering a little bit higher than that. So not the end of the world, but I made just under 10K there. Another great trade was FUBO. FUBO was similar into the craze with BBBY. Again, this was another great red day. Right here, here's the daily chart. Went from 4 to 8 in a day, and the next day went from high 6s down to low 5s. Here's my trade on that. Pretty much, I missed the first pull out the open, but then shorted the bounce, covered a little bit into red-green, and then covered the rest down in the mid 5s. Again, locked in like 12K there. Plenty of other trades. There was actually a lot of IPO scams this month as well, even though I didn't nail nearly as well. I didn't nail them really at all in comparison to like ILAG or LYT. But some of these I did actually make some money on the like secondary red days. JZ didn't really make much on this first day, but this second day, when everyone kind of forgets about it, I shorted some, made I think about like between 10, I don't remember exactly how much, but like 10 to 20 grand there. Yeah, this is it. I think this is it. Shorted into the spike here to red green. Red green was like 15. It held it perfectly. Died almost all day. I remember covering, I think in like the 10s, even though it went as low as 8. Another one was STBX. STBX was another one. Again, didn't make much money on the actual dump day here, but then again, the secondary day was there for it. Made a lot of money, not a lot of money, but I think I made about, what was it? I think I wrote my notes 18 grand there. I don't even know where it is. Yeah, this is it. I don't even know what day it was, but I don't actually. Let's go back more. That's probably why. Yeah, this day right here. Again, same thing. Gave you a spike, fade all day. Just same idea. So, is it would I really consider these the China scams? Like, yes, they are the China scams, but how I played them was more of like a first red day. I mean, forget the fact that they dumped this day. The next day is like just a solid first red day kind of pattern. Like I didn't trade them any differently other than a first red day. I just stayed a little bit aggressive because I knew there was tons of people, being bag held and plenty of people down on their money. And clearly it just backsided after having such a hard sell-off. So that's kind of scattered throughout all these days, all these 10-figure days. And before you know it, I ended up being green of the month. And unfortunately, one thing that's different about this year as well is borrow fees. Like as you can see, my borrow fees are absurdly high these last few months, even back in June 36K, May 22K, April and below, I mean, even March was 21, but February and January this year was usually how it should go. Like only spent a couple grand. I mean, even all of 2021, you can see I spent 2,400 here, 5 grand here, 3 grand, 2 grand. Like it's actually disgusting the fact that I only paid this little for so many months, because this year it's insane. I don't know if it's interest rates, I don't know if it's inflation, but the interest that I'm paying for some of these overnight shorts, some of the borrow fees I'm paying at almost any broker now, is just outrageously higher than it was in previous years. So unfortunately, it's crazy to say if this was only like negative 4 grand, that I would have a pretty solid month of almost 50K. But when you spend 40 grand in borrow fees, it takes up most of your profits that you have. And so I made 12K. Again, it's still good to be green, but yeah, it's another large business expense. So the fact that I'm even green over these 2 months is pretty awesome. I couldn't be happier, and just looking forward to move on. And again, like I said, I learned a lot from HKD. If trade how I've been trading besides BBBY, all the other trades I feel stoked about. Again, didn't take any much bigger losses after that besides this little 15K loss. I don't even think this was, I think this was all one win, but I think I just went bigger and I took a loss that I was okay with taking. But yeah, I mean, I'm really happy with how I've been trading the last few weeks. The market's been giving me, like I said, a lot of solid opportunities. Nothing huge in A+, but a lot of just great singles. And I hope September continues. Now, September I will be traveling again for about 2 weeks or maybe even 3 weeks of the month. So probably going to miss some days, but hopefully just take advantage of when I'm there at the market and there's some plays, and then we'll see how it goes, right? Again, at the end of the day, like I said, this year has been tougher in general. I'm not going to expect too much in the end of the year unless something dramatically changes. Essentially, I just don't want to set high expectations, right? Because I think a lot of people had that after 2021 being such an awesome year, and a lot of people have been humbled and have been corrected, right? Me, myself included. So, anyways, guys, I don't even know how long we've been going on this video, but thanks so much for watching. I hope you guys learned a lot. I'll plan on doing a recap in September. And yeah, thanks for watching, guys. I'll see you guys next time. Later.